I love Ukrainian bread, especially the dark rye. We're calling it Azovskyi, which is what bakehouse, it used to be Borodinsky, but we obviously don't want the old Russian name for the thing. So, but that bread is it will keep for 20 days, fresh.
So, why your book is called not Food and War, but Bread and War in particular?
The smell of baking reminds you of home and of security. So yes, psychologists have, recommended it as an activity to do with people.
There's bakery, cross-pollination. Отже, з вами програма «Несвідоме мистецтво». І я надзвичайно рада вітати в нашій студії ексклюзивну гостю, пані Felicity Spector, журналістку, письменницю, авторку книги «Bread and War», яка розповідає про волонтерські кухні, пекарні та мобільні бред-тракс в Україні. Тобто сьогодні будемо говорити про культуру українського хліба, про ідентичність і щоденну інфраструктуру гідності під час війни. Hello, Felicity. Very happy to see you in the studio.
Thanks so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you for finding time. So you're amidst your book tour around Ukraine.
Kind of. I only really have one event because I mainly come to see the girls from Bake for Ukraine, who are based in Odessa. That's the charity that I've been supporting. And also just to visit some of the food volunteers, like our friend Oleg Bibikov in Sumy, and also some amazing guys in Kharkiv who have created this new Kuren, it's called. It's like a Cossack kitchen charity cafe in Kharkiv. So I wanted to see them as well because I've heard so much about this project. It was a good thing to be able to go on the opening day.
So those are the places, the cities that border the war, basically.
Yeah.
Why you make such choice and what is your book about?
Well, partly because I'm so impressed by the Ukrainian people that I've met who are volunteering and giving up so much of their time to help people in the most difficult situations. And a lot of that work obviously is done in these front cities where the impact of the war is more immediate. Obviously nowhere in Ukraine is free from the war, but in those cities there are a lot of attacks and a lot of people who are homeless or arriving because they've had to leave the border villages and they don't have anything. And so these food charities are really important. And I was just so impressed by the level of social support that ordinary people are giving.
Well, you're thinking about what are the sources of this support, this engagement to help?
Well, it shows how really the book it's about food and it's about how people who work and who volunteer in food are really helping to keep the country going. And I think it's almost a window into the strength of Ukrainian civil society and how regular people, that no one's telling them to do it, no one's organising it by some authorised or official organisation. They've just taken it on themselves. They've created their own charities. They get funding. They fundraise from friends, from wherever they can find sponsorship. And then they make things happen and build mobile food trucks or create kitchens and, work out what's needed in the local area because they live there and they understand. So, for example, there's charity in Kharkiv. The cafe is supporting a group called Volonterska, and they work a lot with the occupied villages near Izium, and they are helping to get these small farmers equipment, seeds, logistics to sell their produce in Kharkiv. They provide all the money, all the support, so the farmers can get all of the income back from the fruit and vegetables that they grow, because it's really hard for them. They've arrived back in a destroyed village. There's nothing, and they need somebody. No one's queuing up to help them, but this charity is, providing what they need.
This is amazing. This is even for some Ukrainians, those kind of problems are not obvious. I mean, that's why British journalist is interested in that in particular. I know that you're a food enthusiast.
Yes, I like food.
So why your book is called not Food and War, but Bread and War in particular?
I suppose because it started with my love for bread, but also this charity Bake for Ukraine that I first started helping out. So my first trip to Ukraine during the full-scale war was in the summer of 2022. I organised a convoy of equipment and some supplies to go to a small bakery in Kyiv their big warehouse was destroyed in a rocket strike, and they didn't have any spare equipment, and all of their ingredients, the storage, everything had gone. And I'd already been in touch with them earlier at the beginning of the full-scale war, because they had started baking in a sort of underground location for soldiers and for the few people who remained in Kyiv, because their commercial premises were closed. And we were trying to arrange some interviews. It didn't work at the time, but I had this contact already. And so I asked them what they needed. And because I have a big food Instagram, I do a lot of baking, I go to restaurants and so on, I have contacts in the food world, and I put out a call: has anybody got professional bakery equipment? We need this. If you have some second-hand that works well, but you would be willing to donate. And within 48 hours, I had all of the things on the list that this place needed. And then, fortunately, there was a small British charity that drove trucks, and they were like, OK, we'll take it. And so we all drove. I mean, I can't drive. I sat there and provided the in-car entertainment. And we drove all the way to Kyiv with 4 trucks full of stuff. And then I came across Bake for Ukraine, and they were doing even more important work with these very small bakeries that were providing free bread for displaced people, elderly, anybody who lived in a place without any resources. And they obviously needed funding to continue doing that. And Bake for Ukraine was a very small group of girls based in Odessa that were doing everything they could to raise money and organise logistics, get equipment to people, whatever they needed. And I thought, they need some help from, fundraising in Western countries. I'm not a fundraiser, but I'm sure we can manage to help them. And since then, we've had a really close relationship, and I come to visit them every couple of months.
Well, thank you for doing that. On behalf of all Ukrainians, especially people in the regions distorted by war, did you go to somewhere close to the front line to see how this bakery and food supply chain works?
Yeah, so I've made quite a few trips. So I started out, the first time I went to Donetsk region in December 2022. That was with another charitable organisation run by Antytila, the pop group, and I had been in touch with them as well. They have obviously very prominent position because people have heard of them, and so we had interviewed them on our news show when they did their pop song with Ed Sheeran, the British pop star, and it was very successful, and they raised a lot of money for their charity work. They also supply territorial defence units, and they help children of soldiers who've been killed. So they do a lot of very important work. And I asked if I could... In the British media, we hadn't really at that point heard much about the work that Ukrainian volunteers were doing. There were some stories about British people who drove to Ukraine, which is great, but obviously most of the work, nearly every, 99% was being done by Ukrainians. And I thought, I want to see how this works and who are the people doing it. The Antytila guys had 2 drivers who had jobs during the week. One of them had a gardening business, and the other one sold fishing tackle. But they, at the weekend, put on bulletproof jackets and drove to Liman and all these, Konstantinivka, all these places to deliver supplies. And it was just a really interesting and very impressive insight. We had a very, very long drive all the way through Donetsk region down that main road. And right at the end, we hadn't even been able to stop to have a drink, or it was hours of driving for these guys. And they would stop and unload the things for the troops and then get back on and drive further. We finally, late at night, stopped somewhere near Pavlohrad. And there was this amazing volunteer kitchen, beautiful, huge long table, beautiful home-cooked food. Guys would come in, they could just sit down all together around this long table like it was a wedding or something, but very simple food, but very homemade and very lovingly made. And the lady who ran that was just incredible. And she's still open every single day. It's free of charge. Anybody can come, soldiers, volunteers, medics, whoever drives by and knows where it is. And they managed to keep it going. And I just thought she was a real hero, this lady. all the volunteers there were just like regular.
Do you remember her name?
She's called Natalia, and she's in the book. There's a chapter about her, and I just thought she was so impressive, and she just took it on. Her son was serving in the armed forces, and she knew how important it was for these guys to know that people were looking out for them and to have a taste of home, you know, when on the way back or on the way into, you know, the front lines. So I then had the idea that maybe I should try and collect more of these stories. I also travelled with Good Bread from Kyiv. They are a very amazing bakery. They employ guys with mental disabilities. So they take on and mentor them and teach them baking. They want to give them a dignified role in the workplace and to show society that there's no reason why people with Down syndrome or with cerebral palsy, they're just regular people. There's no need to shut them away in some kind of home. You know, they do a great job. There's a lovely family atmosphere there. It's very warm. And they also deliver bread every day to the frontline territories. So I travelled with them into Kherson and then also into Siversk and some around Slavyansk area. And they were delivering bread to lots of different villages there and towns. And Siversk was, you know, super difficult place. People living in the basement and there's nothing there. It's just, you know, they wouldn't have any food if these volunteers didn't go.
So there is like a frontline food delivery by volunteers and also in cities and villages. Do you see difference in approach in cities and villages when the bread arrives, the food arrives, how people behave? Something interesting there.
So obviously when they go to these very front places, like somewhere like Siversk, for example, no one is outside because it's too dangerous. There's not people walking. Maybe you see one person. They are in underground. So the volunteers have to know the area. They have to know where to go. So they have been, normally they have some relationship there. They meet one person who then tells them, right, there are 7 people living under this building and you can drop off bread in front of this place, other people. And so they have to have some very expert local knowledge. You don't want to hang around or go to the wrong place. And also, I guess, the soldiers who are at the checkpoints need to know you and trust that you're, you know, legitimate volunteers and so on.
You mean well,
Yeah. So they have a good local support and local links in those places because it's very difficult to operate there.
Right.
Nowadays, I think with this drone threat, it's even more difficult because it's very dangerous to go down those roads. And so they have to have the equipment as drone detectors and they have to know really, really what they're doing and maybe have some military expertise, somebody telling them how to navigate those threats because, you know, you can't just drive up there and assume that you're not going to be, you know, a target. Because obviously the Russians don't care if you're delivering bread or you're a Red Cross. Yeah, so that's a really, you know, hats off to the people who do it. It's kind of very, very risky. So our Bake for Ukraine bakery is in Mykolaiv. We have a mobile bakery, which it doesn't travel around, it stays in one place because it's logistically easier. And we have an amazing group of volunteers from Mykolaiv who bake on the bakery, and then they deliver to villages in the deoccupied areas. And there aren't very many resources there, but people have returned home and they're trying to rebuild everything and, you know, live their lives again. And so they know the areas. They're quite difficult to get to because the roads are terrible. So not many organisations go with supplies. So that's why they choose to go to the places that they visit. And they have they go every week, so they know people and they have a good relationship. And people love to see the bread coming, and they come out and they're sort of excited to see it, and they're really happy to get. It's homemade, it's sourdough, it's really good quality. It keeps very well. We use local ingredients and so on, so people really enjoy getting this, and it's proper Ukrainian recipes like they used to have. So people are really, this is exactly what we really needed, something that was made by people by hand, and it takes 2 days to make a loaf of bread, really. So it's a lot of effort goes in, but for a good cause.
Do you have your favorite Ukrainian bread recipe?
So I don't make bread at home with sourdough because I'm not the expert, but I love Ukrainian bread, especially the dark rye. The really sort of almost sweet with some spices in, and it's just delicious, especially with some cream cheese. I don't eat meat, but I have it with with maybe Forschmack or something like this.
I'm always thinking salad when I hear
Yes,
about
I know.
it.
Everyone's like, you don't eat salad. I'm like, I'm Jewish, I can't eat pork. But I really, really enjoy, I mean, all Ukrainian, I've had so many delicious breads here with buckwheat, with different wheat grains, with a mixture of rye. I mean, it's just fantastic. The quality is amazing.
I'm just thinking that since you have some geographical exposition along the front line, and I applaud your bravery and thank you again for doing that and for raising awareness about this program by your work and book and interviews you're giving. Could you see the difference in preparations of bread amongst the population that come, or they...
So it's quite interesting because when we originally we were making my friend Maria, who's the co-founder of Bake for Ukraine. She's also a cookery writer and she knows a lot. She's like an encyclopedia. You can ask any question, she knows all the answers. She was quite keen for us to make this traditional palyanitsa recipe. She said that's what we used to make before the Soviet Union came and just made everything some factory standard bread. It's really nice bread. It has some dairy, some milk. And so it's kind of soft and it keeps well, but it's quite a little bit sweet. And people really like that bread. And then we started making this kind of more rye, whole grain. It's healthier. People are like, oh, where's the white bread? They wanted the kind of simple white bread, but we're like, no, this is better for you. But actually now we started making this kind of very dark rye. We're calling it Azovskyi, which is what Bakehouse, it used to be Borodinsky, but we obviously don't want the old Russian name for the thing. So, but that bread is it will keep for 20 days fresh. And we've certainly eaten it. The guys in Mykolaiv sent us some in Odessa. We had it 4 days after it was made. It was just like the first day, really good quality. And that bread is, it's just really good for you, very nutritious. And you can always feel it doing you good. My friend Katria, who comes from Kherson region, was occupied, so she escaped into Ukraine, into Mykolaiv, and then she's now in Lviv. And she never made bread with rye because in Kherson they don't grow it. But now she's in Lviv, they have these different farms and have different crops, so she's really excited to be working with something different.
There's a bakery, cross-pollination.
Exactly, yeah. And she works with she didn't have a job. She had to leave everything behind when they left. She brought her sourdough starter with her so she could make bread with it. And she couldn't, it was so traumatic, the whole escape, horrible. Her story is in the book and I can't imagine how scary it would have been to drive through this checkpoints and grey zone and with her husband and the Russian soldiers pulling him out of the car and all this. Fortunately they're okay, but she couldn't bake again for several weeks. She didn't feel she had the strength, but as soon as she started baking it helped her to kind of recover from the stress.
So would you say that there is a sort of autotherapy in baking?
Yes, in fact we have a friend in Kyiv who is helping with soldiers overcoming the stress, the post-traumatic stress, and he does some workshops, and they can come in and bake and make challah bread and make cookies, and just something about the kneading of the dough. We've also seen this in Maria saw it in Germany with they were doing a project with Syrian refugees, and one guy had lost his hand he picked up a grenade which went off somewhere in Syria. And he was baking with one hand, and he's now a professional baker. He really enjoyed doing it and decided to go into it as a job. But initially, they were just sort of helping people to overcome that initial stress, and it takes their mind away from the kind of panic, because it's very rhythmic and it's kind of comforting. The smell of baking reminds you of home and of security. Yeah. So yes, the psychologists have recommended it as an activity to do with people.
Wonderful. Well, Did people that you meet along your way were telling you how sacred the bread is for Ukrainians? Because I'm not in a position to tell the story, but I'm sure that people who are having their hands on the subject
Exactly.
were telling you about that. Is it different from how you treat bread in UK?
So different for many, many reasons. I think in the UK it's just a commodity that's not really treated very respectfully. It's just bread. It's like you make it into a sandwich and you don't really think about it. I think for many reasons here in Ukraine, I mean, the Holodomor, obviously I could see how much people value bread and they won't throw it away. They won't, even if it's from last week, they're like, no, we don't throw bread away. It's very precious. My grandmother told me how they was starving and, in some cases, I think, also the religious significance of different festivals, and there's a bread associated with it. Mm-hmm. The Easter, the Pascha, and then at Christmas, this korolai bread and so on. Karavai. And so all these, sort of symbols of something, which is significant in itself, but it's made through a bread that you can share with other people at your table. And I'm really interested in that. One of the times I came to Kyiv, Silpo had one of their sort of open-air markets. It was the first time, I think, since the full-scale war that they had put it on, fresh and local, and they had a theme of bread. It was in Podil, in this big courtyard, and they had some stands with different bakers from the city, and they had in the centre this big display of about 20 different breads, all different shapes and different origins, and that you could pick up a special magazine and you could look through and it would tell you what the bread was and what the significance was and the history. It was really fascinating because there were so many and the regional differences were so great. It was a real education.
Speaking also about the foreign outlook, I bet it is hard for the Western person to imagine that there is hunger in Ukraine in some regions, and that kind of provoke them to think about it and to help out. I mean, is that true? Do you talk about it and people are surprised, or is it like a norm that war goes hand in hand with hunger and other bad things?
I think it's quite interesting when you try to explain what life. People say, "What's it like in Ukraine?" and you say, "Well, it depends where you are.
Yeah.
If you're in Lviv, it's relatively calm there most of the time, but you see funerals happening all the time. So it's not like they don't know about the war. There are often, these very sad convoys of cars with, the soldiers who've been killed and their families and so on, right through the centre of the city, and people stop and they're very respectful. But you don't have the same level of attacks as you would have in, say, Sumy or Kharkiv. So it's very different. But people always say to me, "Do you fly to Kyiv?" And I'm like, "No, obviously there's no airports." Or they say, "There are restaurants? How they don't understand that businesses still operate and that people try to live the best life that they can manage and keep jobs going and keep incomes, going as best they can, because what else are you supposed to do?"
I would presume that the most common question when you talk about people near the front line from the Western point of view would be, why won't they leave?
Yeah, well, sometimes even Ukrainians will ask that. I mean, when
how you feel, what is the answer?
I know it's complicated. Like when we were in Sibirsk, it was horrible. People lived in there were rats running around because there's trash everywhere. Who is going to collect trash? I mean, no one's going to risk going to take away some trash piles. So, it was unsanitary. There's no running water. How is it alive? In some basement. But they have their own community there, and maybe some of them are just traumatized and they've just forgotten the normal sort of life that they had before. Sometimes they have a relative who's died, who's buried there, they don't want to leave them, or they just say, "I don't know where I would go," or maybe they're waiting for Russians, who knows. The food people said to me, "It's not our job to judge them. We are delivering them food. Everyone deserves to have the basic necessities of life, and it's not for us to say whether they should or shouldn't. I know some people who do evacuations, and they say they were angry when they saw people with children who were refusing to take the children away, and they were like, no, there's no place for a child. They haven't got the power to decide for themselves, but they shouldn't be in these places. It's wrong. It's just wrong. So they were saying, there are some, and sometimes you can't force people to move out of their homes, even though it seems from the outside completely crazy to be staying somewhere like that. People have the right to make their own decisions if they're adults.
So this kind of work is a respect to their decision, basically.
Yeah, because everyone is, you can't dehumanize people and just sort of turn them into,
into furniture and move them.
Even if, it seems, and in a way it is irresponsible in some ways, because the volunteers then have to risk their own lives to bring food or to try and evacuate people, and but they volunteered to do that, and I guess they've decided to take that risk. I mean,
there are many situations in life, especially in wartime, when there is no good decision.
Exactly, and I can completely see that. I mean, some of these elderly people, they don't have relations or relatives who could take them in. If they move out and go to some city, they don't know anyone. They're given some room in an apartment. They don't have anything. I mean, it is hard, really hard to suddenly have, if you're in your 70s or something and you don't have anything familiar with you. It's horrible.
As for, you're right about that, right? Not necessarily in the book, but some reports and articles and everything. Where is this ethical line of how to show really harsh conditions and tell stories about people and preserving their dignity at the same time?
I mean, I don't tend to... I don't like to pry into people's private business, I suppose. So writing it from the charity's point of view, I think at least I can just tell that side of the story, because I'm with them anyway. They've taken me with them. We trust each other. I show people the finished story. I'm like, are you happy with me writing this? So
this book is not about the people asking for bread, but about people providing bread.
Yeah, pretty much. And also other food. So the first section is about the bread, and then it goes into other... So I went to visit soldiers and some groups who cook for the army. And then I go and speak to different businesses. So I went to Kherson and we spoke to lots of... a few people who somehow managed to run food businesses. And then in Kharkiv, where despite everything, people are still opening new things and they have this kind of optimism from somewhere. And then I speak to some amazing chefs who just really believe in promoting Ukraine through the food culture. Like obviously Yevhen Kopatenko, but also a lot of other people who aren't so famous, but they still have that same desire to show people Ukraine through food, because it's a good gateway. Even if people don't know anything about a country, you can give them some borscht or some syrniki, and they like, I want to know.
In the same role, because the book contains recipes.
There are a few. They're not mine, obviously, because I'm not Ukrainian, but they are other people have donated very kindly. We have 8 recipes. There's the bread that Bake for Ukraine make, and then we just have a few nice dishes which maybe people won't have heard of, but they're not difficult to make, so they can try making banosh, or they can make some syrniki for breakfast. I'm determined to make syrniki popular in the West, because I think they're great. What's not to love?
They're better than pancakes, for sure.
Exactly.
I mean, nutritious-wise.
Yeah, very high protein. They should be very popular at the moment.
You said that the first part of the book is about bread, and I looked through it and I came across the word faith in that section. How is that connected?
So I went to visit, because I come from a Jewish family, and my grandparents were originally from Dmytro, but they left over 100 years ago when it was still called Yekaterinoslav, and they came to England. I don't know much about them. My father sadly has passed away, so I can't ask him. And they died before I was born, but I always had that idea that they were from Ukraine, and that I had that in my family history. So I wanted to go to Dnipro, and we visited the synagogue. But also, there's a matzah factory there, that makes these very kosher matzah, handmade. It's a very famous now, and people buy them from all over the world. You have to order a year in advance because they only make as many as... It's a very complicated procedure. It has to be overseen by a rabbi. You only have 17 minutes, I think, from starting the process to finishing the matzah, because the bread is not allowed to ferment, otherwise it's not kosher
space
for
for
Passover.
mistake.
Yeah, so they can only make a certain amount, and so it's very sought after. So I visited them, and then I also visited a church in Kharkiv where Bake for Ukraine helped them to build a bakery because they wanted to be able to make bread. They're in the North Saltivka area, which is quite badly affected by Russian artillery and by shelling. And there are a lot of people there who need support. So this church has been making food and delivering it. And they were desperate to make bread. And so somehow they found Maria and they said, oh, we got them equipment. They built the bakery and now they're making bread there. So it was a story of how religious groups are also part of the effort to supply not just their own congregation, but the community.
Yeah, serving the community. Wonderful. What was the most surprising story that you are telling in this book?
Gosh, I mean, there were
like
so
for
many.
You.
Yes, yeah, there were so many that I never imagined that I would be. I just remember when we went to visit these Marines, and we were driving in the car, and it was quite a complicated procedure. You have to go to some car park behind a store, and then a man will meet you, get into the car, and then you follow another car. It was all quite obviously you can't go somewhere which is known about. And I also visited some soldiers with this other group who make food for them, and we went to visit some 3rd Assault Brigade guys. And again, there's a whole process. You turn off the phones, and just making sure that it's all secure and that you're not inadvertently revealing anything in photographs or anything like that. And the care which people take to preserve that security, but also, these were guys who they were not at the zero line, but they had a couple of weeks a few miles away just to kind of regroup and do some training, and then they were able to kind of cook and make hot meals, and I was really impressed with I mean, not everybody has such. I think they took me to see the ones that were particularly good. I mean, I'm sure I've heard that not everyone has that level of creativity. But the ingredients were fresh, and they had places they were cooking over different forms of fire or ovens, and they were really trying to do their best for the guys. And it's a very hard thing to organise. But if you don't have the right nutrition, then you're not going to be able to keep up the energy that you need for all those really hard days. But I have so much respect for those guys, and in the West, I think people tend to think of soldiers as some kind of professional army that sort of went into, decided to sign up when, and these are just, everybody's neighbour and their sons and their fathers, and
yes, but also
they have this great responsibility.
By choosing to do what you do, you have a privilege of meeting the best people in Ukraine.
Exactly.
Those who are defending us, those who are feeding us.
Yeah.
Where food is very hard to access. So.
Yeah, and those people that help them and so on, and they said, it seems a small thing just to make food for people, but it's it's what we do, but also it shows that we haven't forgotten about them and we care and we want to.
Yeah, it's life sustaining.
Yeah,
and also
yeah.
It's about hospitality and kind of warmth.
Exactly.
I am amazed. Our conversation made me hungry.
I have that effect.
Because I have this smell of bread in the air, and it kind of makes it more comfortable to go through hard subjects that we are talking about. So I confirm on the therapeutical essence of baking. Well, ending our program, I would like you to tell a bit more about the book in terms of whether it's going to be translated in Ukrainian, when is it possible to buy it now, and which cities are you going to visit in the framework of promoting the book?
So at the moment, it's possible to buy it on Yakubu. It's quite expensive on that. So we are in conversations with some bookshops. So hopefully we'll get it into Sense and then a couple of other bookshops. We're also in discussion with the publisher about translating it into Ukrainian, but my publishers own the rights to the translations, so I can't make the deal myself. I have to let it go through them. But that's my aim, it would be lovely to, I think some other places have also expressed an interest in stocking it. So
wonderful.
Yeah, the better, it's nice just to be able to promote it to people. I had hoped to bring copies over with me, and I ordered them from London, but everything is difficult nowadays, and they're still in the middle of Warsaw, I think, going through customs. But they will be here at some point, and then I'm going now to Odessa, and we will have a meeting there as well about the book. But I will come again. I usually try to come every couple of months. I know that Oleg is keen for me to come to Sumy again and make Syrniki with him.
Maybe we will go together next time you come.
He is a great guy, and sadly I met him after I'd finished the book, otherwise there would definitely have been a chapter about him. So maybe in the next book
it's
Oleg will
interesting
feature.
How this special conditions we're living in kind of open person up to experience which is definitely beyond his comfort zone. Like he seems like an introverted person who has to become extrovertive to promote his enthusiasm and to get his point across and make the deed.
Yes.
So it's interesting how these conditions shape us and make us.
Well, like this young man Dmytro from Antytila, who organises their charity. He's a drummer in a rock band, but suddenly he's taking on this really complicated logistics of fundraising and buying equipment for military units and delivering them to difficult places and finding drivers and arranging the route. And he's suddenly doing this, aged 25. And you think, wow, he did it really well. But he's never had any experience in that before, and he just had to get on with it. And a lot of people have suddenly had to adapt to something completely unexpected.
Why are you doing this? And how you cope with this trauma and re-traumatization, and then you kind of process it through writing, so you're reliving it again? Sometimes what helps?
So I really wanted, because I felt so... I just have made such good friends here. I've made such strong friends. I mean, I'm really touched, and I feel guilty sometimes because people are so generous and kind and everything. I'm like, oh no, I should be giving it to you. And they're like, no, come to stay with us, and we'll find some car for you. And I'm so grateful to all of those people who've helped. Really amazing. But also, I just feel that nobody else. Well, maybe a few people, but it's not very easy to find the stories of ordinary people like this in England. Like I work for a TV news company. On our TV news, they just show, they tend to show the fighting. They go to visit, some front zero point, the drama. That's what TV wants, exciting news, I guess they think, and politicians and, important. And it's very important also to cover those issues, but I wanted to tell the stories behind that of that's important. But also this is how it keeps the rest of society operates and keeps going. And I was just so impressed by the people I met and what they were doing, and I just thought, I want that to be preserved, like people to read about them and to know about what they've done, and to really appreciate that, because all of us in Western countries owe our privilege and freedom to what's happening, the people who are putting their lives on the line in Ukraine, and we need to say thank you all the time for that, because it's so we're only in that peaceful situation because sadly Ukraine isn't.
Thank you for saying that, and thank you for promoting our bread culture, for supporting our people, and for bringing this English spark in the volunteer work. Thank you, Felicity.
Oh, thank you so much.
Finding time, and best of luck for the book, especially in UK.
Yes, thank you very much.
З нами була Felicity Spector, авторка книги Bread and War. Дякую за увагу. Стоїмо.